Hello and welcome back to the DriveTribe podcast. You join us in an absolutely buzzing DriveTribe office. We've brought you here so you can see behind the scenes what we get up to. I'm joined by Mike Fernie.
Hello.
And by Rob Burnett.
Hello.
And I think it's a vintage week for car stuff this week. There's been cars going more than 300 miles an hour. There's been some cool things going on with Jaguar designers that Mike likes. And we've got some unpopular opinions. And we'll get us started with how you left us last episode, Mike. I'm not sure if you listened to the first episode of season 2 of the DriveTribe podcast.
Cliffhanger.
It was a cliffhanger. It was a cliffhanger. Mike Fernie, you ended with a single line that truck racing is ballsack.
Yeah,
that was better than the end of series 1 of Breaking Bad. I mean,
how did that end?
Spoilers. I can't remember. Yeah, spoilers.
I mean, yeah, it's probably similar.
So yes, I had my first trip ever to the Nürburgring, which is quite an exciting thing for someone who's into their cars. But sadly, I'd just come from the Formula E, and truck racing was the most extreme opposite to that. Basically, these big 8-litre diesel trucks compared to electric car racing just really shocked me, essentially, and I found it amazing that exists in 2019.
Was the racing any good? So I mean, obviously these things are belching out copious amounts of bad things that we're all trying to ban.
Well, not really, because they're speed limited, so they all hit a limit going down the street.
What kind of speed?
I think it's 100 miles an hour.
Why limit it?
I mean, in the corners that's not going to be an issue, but
yeah.
It means coming down the street they hit a limit.
So they can't slipstream?
No,
you
not
think
really.
that'd be like have a massive slipstream effect in trucks because you're destroying the atmosphere as you're ploughing through it.
But we just so happened to be sat in the middle of the pit street on the Nürburgring GP circuit, which is not a good place to watch it. Firstly,
is that not too big for those trucks doing that speed?
Well, to be honest, on a GP track, there's probably enough width that they're like, even if they're 3 wide, it's kind of okay. But they come past you, just billows of black smoke. It stank. They didn't sound good. We didn't really see any action, and looking at them coming back, it didn't look like any positions had changed anyway. So it just wasn't that great. But I was there to play a new truck racing game, European Truck Racer, and that was actually okay. That was actually quite fun. And one of the coolest things I didn't actually know about truck racing was that you have to manually cool the brakes with water.
What?
So the trucks actually have...
Because they're so heavy.
Yeah, they have more water on board than they have fuel.
What?
So actually the most liquid.
You have to manage your water supply,
otherwise you'll go in the brakes, nothing will happen. So they're so heavy that they need to have water manually gushed onto the brakes.
That sounds like one of those kind of Colin Chapman cheat things, from the 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
You start off with these big water tanks.
Exactly. It doesn't sound like 2019 tech, does it? So the whole thing seemed very old-fashioned, and the whole just pollution aspect of it seemed just not right.
Especially when you swap your opponent's water for like something highly flammable. Just put it on the brakes into the picture. Oh, I've caught fire. Quite a bad way. So, would you go to a round of truck racing again?
I can't say I would. If I had a choice between truck racing and a Formula E race, Formula E all day.
But Formula E is kind of absolutely smashing it, isn't it? Because it's really close racing. They've got the car formula nailed down so that you can actually do a race in a car, not 2 cars, and it just seems really well matched and very close, and lots of big overtakes and like last corners and things like that.
Yeah, and I think because all the manufacturers are now pouring into it, it shows that it's going to essentially be the way forward in the next few years.
Porsche has unveiled their Formula E car, leading into the news. Nice.
And apparently, they've got twice the budget of any other Formula E team. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can just come in and bulldoze everyone.
What can you do with a Formula E car? As in, kind of, how much different can you make it to all the other cars to get an advantage?
Well, that's it. They make it very restricted. The one thing you can pour money into is if you develop your own powertrain. So Audi have developed what they call the best powertrain, and then other teams come and buy it because they know it'll be the best.
Right, okay.
So I imagine Porsche have used all that money to develop their own powertrain, which will then make it quicker than the Audi.
Is the Porsche one secretly an Audi one, but tarted up a bit?
Maybe. I would hope that all that budget means that it is different, but the whole VW group thing.
That looks very familiar. What are these 4 circles on the
motors?
It's nothing.
And also, basically, the rear of the cars is open. So you're not like when we went filming in New York, we weren't allowed to go around the back of any of the cars. So there is some. That's cool. It's still quite stock, but there are a lot of aspects where you can pour money in. So Porsche will have done that.
Who's driving for Porsche next year? Do we know yet? Or is that still up?
So it's Andre Lotterer, who was a Porsche Le Mans driver.
quite famous in
Yep.
everything but Formula 1.
Well, he has done.
He was in
He's
F1,
done
yeah.
one F1 race. I
Oh,
think.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Jaguar test drive.
He did one race for Caterham, I think, when Caterham were in Formula 1 a few years ago.
I can only hear Andre Lotter's name in the voice of John Hindhoff, whatever his name is, from Le Mans, Radio Le Mans. It's like, Andre Lotter! There's like, there's no T's in that anymore. You've taken them all out. But yeah.
And then, yeah, his teammate will be Neil Yanni. So they were both Porsche 919 Le Mans
Right,
drivers.
okay,
So
so now they've shut that down. It's like, go
Yes.
to Formula E.
exactly that.
That's cool.
So it'll be very interesting to see how they go.
Both very good drivers.
And when's the next season start?
So testing starts in October in Valencia, and then the first race will be November in Saudi.
And are there any big changes other than obviously Porsche coming along with their bag of money?
There's more races, but other than that, I feel like there is some changes, but I don't know them off the top of my head.
So it's coming back to UK is one of the big race changes, and it's going to be in the XL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
in
is
East
basically,
London.
if you've ever been to the London Motor Show or if you've ever done your GCSEs in East London, you would have been to the XL.
Is that right? Do the exams in there?
Yeah, yeah.
They were
Wow.
doing some the day when we were setting up for the motor show, like in
Yeah.
the next, room along, basically.
It seems massively inappropriate.
That's
So
stressful.
it's all these kids doing their most important British exams, not from the UK. GCSEs are like the exams you do at 16 to basically
Yeah.
determine your future. And they've got two big exhibition halls full of kids at desks, like shitting themselves and cramming for their exams. And then 2 doors down, you've got an AMG doing drifts all day on a shiny rubber floor going,
With Tiffany Dell at the wheel.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
A glass of wine, on the other hand. Doesn't do that. So, yeah, that'd be an interesting one, because that's the first track when they race the XL. They're going indoors and outside again, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes. So the big issues there is like the FIA has safety regulations about blinding drivers going from light to dark, but I imagine Monaco has to deal with the same thing, so it's probably going to be okay.
Yeah, but in Monaco, you've only got the one place of the tunnel, and it's quite quick. It's not half the lap, which this is going to be like half the lap, right? It's
Yeah.
indoors. And the other problem is, of course, if it's raining, you're going to have half a wet track, half a dry track. Which, it does already happen in Formula 1, say at like Spa, sometimes one half of the circuit will be wet and the other half won't. So it's not unprecedented, but it will be interesting to see how they cope with that.
And they're talking like pyrotechnics and everything. It's not just going to be like a standard indoor arena. They're really going for
That's
it.
really
So
cool.
it should be cool.
That should be interesting. So, next bit of news I want to talk about is today, probably dates the podcast a bit. Bugatti has done something that I don't think we really thought was coming this year, but they've gone faster than 300 miles an hour with the Chiron. So when the Chiron came out, I think it was limited to 260-ish, which it was a bit faster than the Veyron, but not much. Bugatti always said, it's down to the tires, because we are French. But yeah, they've now done 305 miles an hour in a modified one, which is a bit longer. It's 25 centimetres longer. They've lost the moving flippy-uppy rear wing thing for weight. They put different tyres on it, which were reinforced, so similar to the tyres that you get on a Chiron, but they put lots more bands of metal in them so they don't fly apart at 5,700 G, apparently, at top speed.
What? Really?
It's like, imagine trying
Blimey.
to keep a piece of rubber round.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mental.
Because that has been the limiting factor for a long
Yeah.
time, right? Is the tyres. Yeah,
Yeah,
the car's technically capable of it.
They just think that they would fly apart. And
Yeah.
I think apparently they tested the tyres. Apparently they tested the tyres on a bench in America up to 500 and something kilometres now, which is 310. So they
Right.
pretty much got to that. And Andy Wallace, the guy that did the McLaren F1
Legend.
legend, he did the McLaren F1 top speed, the Veyron top speed. He's done this, and he basically crept it up in 50 kilometre an hour increments until they just could do it.
You've been in a Chiron with Andy Wallace.
I have.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning it. Yeah, it's very fast, and he's a very cool dude. All I really remember him saying is that when he was doing 241 or whatever it was in the McLaren F1, it was all over the place, and it was like going left and right, and he had to like kind of cover the brakes with his left foot a bit,
Christ.
just because it was like literally going between two lanes at 200
God.
miles an hour because the front started lifting and everything else. And he said that they had to come out the top bend at Volkswagen's test track, which has got like a massive couple of miles of straights. He had to come out at 200 kilometres an hour, which is 120, I think,
Yes. Yeah.
miles an hour. And then he was at full throttle for 70 seconds in a Chiron,
It's alarming.
which is quite fast, isn't it? I think it's just such a big milestone to have hit, and I kind of didn't really come into work this morning expecting to see that, and I'm just amazed that they've done it. And Bugatti has now said, we've hit 300 miles an hour, we've proven that we make the fastest cars in the world, now we're going to bow out gracefully and stop chasing big speed numbers, because there's more to making a car than making it to a high top speed.
Yeah, and I mean, where can you go now? You can't do 400.
No.
So, I mean, that's the end of the game,
but
isn't it?
what is to say you can't do 400? Because 10, 20 years ago, you would have said you can't do 300. Because
True.
people had just got to 200.
I imagine within the next year, someone, so 305 is 490 kph. So someone, I would imagine Koenigsegg, are going to come along and do 500 kph. So it's just a small increment, but
Yeah,
it's
but
like
it sounds
a
much more,
milestone.
but yeah.
Because the next one would be 350, which
Yeah.
is just another league.
Yeah,
Like, so
yeah.
much more power, crazy aeros. So I reckon Koenigsegg will come along, get that tyre from Michelin, and do 500 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, I think.
Does it really mean anything?
Well, it's kind of a bit, it's just willy waving, isn't it, really? It's like manufacturers kind of flopping them out saying, this is what I can do. I put a little poll up on the news story on DriveTribe this morning. About 6,000 people have done it already. I said, should we stop at 300 miles an hour? 60% of people have said, no, keep going. So
Wow.
it's petrol heads who aren't having to drive at 300 miles an hour, I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
But Bugatti coming out and saying we don't have to focus on top speed anymore is basically their way of saying this has cost us so much fucking money. Can we stop making these cars at a loss and just like focus on making nice cars? Because then they don't have to cost as much or cost us as much. I imagine they'll still keep the price the same and take the margin. But
Has anyone done a proper track test of a Chiron? Like, does it work on? Would it work around Silverstone, or is it just a missile?
they handle pretty well for what they are, but like what they are is quite heavy.
2 tons.
Yeah, or thereabouts, I think. I don't know. I've not seen one. Andy Wallace kind of got us up to like 2G in the corners in a car park, but yeah. That was the Bugatti Chiron doing 300 miles an hour. Nothing happened in between us talking about that and talking about other things. Next up, talking of motoring legends, Ian Callum. He's just launched his new design agency. So he was Jaguar's design guru for many, many years. He made such great looking cars as... And...
Savage.
No, he's made lovely cars. I just can't remember any of them. They weren't Jags. So anyway, he's gone back, gone freelance basically, and made his own company called Callum, capital letters.
All caps, yeah.
All caps, which is really annoying as a copy editor because you don't like words that are in all caps because it's shouty. But thanks, Ian. But anyway, let's hand over to Jaguar correspondent Mike Fernie to talk about why he can walk on water.
Well, basically, he took Jag from being old man's company into what it is today.
An old man's company. Desperately trying to not be an old man's company.
The main one being the Jaguar F-Type, which I know, Rob, you're a big fan of.
I am a big fan of that car, yeah.
The F-Type is cool, actually, and
Yeah,
Project
yeah.
8. I'm just being mean, Jag.
But before Jag, he was at Aston Martin, which again, he took Aston from being quite an old man company to being, again, what it basically is today. He came up with the Vanquish, DB7, DB9, and technically the old Vantage before moving to Jag. So all those really nice James Bondy Astons, he was behind basically. And now with this new freelance job, he's come up with something called the Vanquish 25, which is essentially his perfect Vanquish. He obviously didn't. He feels the car he designed needs a bit of an update, and this is it.
So is this like the director's cut of that car?
Exactly that.
it's made
It's the
it
Blade
3
Runner
hours.
that you want to watch.
Yeah, without
Made
the
it
crappy
4 hours long for no reason.
narrative.
So what's he actually done to it?
So the main thing, he's not tweaked the aesthetics too much, like the base design's still there.
I mean, it's a good looking car.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's tweaked stuff like the headlights, he's put a rear diffuser on it, with like integrated exhaust.
White writing on the tyres.
Yes.
That must have taken me ages to come up with that.
Well, that is one thing. He likes big wheels. He likes filling out those arches. So that's one thing. He's made the tires a bit bigger. And yeah, he's updated the lights, so it's all LEDs now.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it's just sort of nip and tuck here and there. But one of the main things is the transmission. So the old Vanquish was handicapped by, it was one of the first cars to have flappy paddles.
Right, so it's a
And-
robotized manual, basically.
Yeah, so, and the worst, if you wanted to get it shifting properly, you had to lift off. If everyone's done a flappy paddle before, you could normally just stay flat and
Yeah.
just shift it. But to get it to work properly, you had to lift off as if you were in a manual
Yeah,
and pull the trigger.
Yeah.
But now it's been replaced by, I imagine, a brand new Aston torque converter gearbox, which will make a big difference.
That's cool. So it's not really just design. He has like reimagined the whole
Yeah, exactly
thing.
that. And they're £550,000, which is a lot, but that includes them sourcing a Vanquish for
Okay.
you.
So they're like,
So it's
what,
not too bad.
150 grand or something now?
Yeah,
If you can
so-
find one.
So yeah, and the interior's been completely updated. So there are some serious shifts, but I mean, 550 is a lot, but
That's quite
people will
cool.
pay it. Definitely.
I was going to say, so he's only going to make 25,
Yeah,
is that right? He's
yeah.
only gonna do 20?
And I'll actually see it again. This might date this, but I'll see it on Friday at the Concours d'Elegance because that's when they're sort of
At
unveiling
Hampton
it
Court.
publicly. Yeah.
Ah,
So
lovely.
that should be good.
You should go and check out the vine there. So in the back of the palace, they've got this kind of lean-to conservatory. It's a bit fancy in that. It's like Henry VIII's lean-to conservatory,
Right.
and it's got this vine in it, which is growing grapes, and it's massive. It's well worth it.
And it's been there for a few hundred
Yeah,
years.
I think so. Probably beheaded a few people under it.
Cool.
Wives, probably for not watering the vine.
I'll tell Ian about that.
Yeah, so Ian, that's enough about the car. Have you seen the grapes on this bad boy? But that's cool. So I presume this is like the flagship for his new brand, kind of like his portfolio, if you will.
Yes, and it's a good start, but fingers crossed. He's always said that the biggest regret from his career is not pushing the Jaguar CX-75 into production. It was supposed to be Jag's hypercar, hybrid hypercar, but the board shut it down.
That was one that originally had jet turbines in it at
That's
some
it,
point. That
yeah.
was cool.
And then it had a Williams F1 four-cylinder, essentially,
Yes.
that was twin-charged. And yeah, basically they've made, I think, 5 actual prototypes that are sitting in Jag's museum. And it's one of the most stunning cars, but it never made it to production. So hopefully,
Why not?
there was a financial crisis right at the time, which has always been Jag's issue. The
Yeah.
XJ220 was a financial
Yeah.
crisis. This is a financial
Yeah.
crisis.
Maybe
And
they caused them.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence.
And yeah, basically
Brexit.
just Jag wasn't in a position he needed to make cars that were going to sell.
That's annoying. I know a guy that's actually driven a Jag with the Williams F1 engine in it.
Wow,
I'm not allowed to talk about it.
I bet it
Apart
was
from that,
amazing.
it said it took 20 minutes to start using various laptops because it was a Formula
That's
1
what you
engine.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
and
that's
then it
always the
fired
thing.
up, and then it was just super spiky and terrifying.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's great. Great people like us, and like you, but I guess not so much.
If you've got
real
a
world
day
sales.
to drive a car, then
yeah,
yeah.
do that. That's cool. I wonder if he'll go and do something with some of his other cars, like. Well, he's clearly working with Aston because they've been promoting this as well.
Yeah, they've been weirdly happy about this. Normally, brands are really iffy about you messing about
I
with their
saw
designs, but
Dr. Andy Palmer
Yeah, he's
giving him a
sharing
tweet.
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
well done.
So is this going to be what he does? He's not going to be designing new cars from the ground up, or we don't know yet.
I imagine they'll get to that point. But I think this
okay.
is a good place to start, and he'll just make shitloads of money off each one
Yeah,
to
yeah.
then set up. I imagine a bespoke car.
So we could end up at the point that Gordon Murray is at now, where he's
Yes.
now just about to.
Yes, exactly.
Produce.
That. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking this would be a good little synergy. You get Gordon Murray and Ian Callum
Oh,
working together,
wow.
and you can have some very clever cars that look better than they currently do, which would be nice.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
It's interesting. And he could do the XK. Maybe he could do the XK again.
Well, I had a drunken conversation with him on my first ever car launch.
Your first ever drink.
And he did say that they were, at that time, that was 2 years ago, they were developing a new XK. But I imagine, with what's happened with JLR recently, that definitely got canned.
Yeah.
Essentially a 4-seater F-Type.
Right.
So,
yeah.
yeah, that might not actually be a bad idea. in
That'd
terms
be
of
quite
some
cool. Well, even if
gazebo
it doesn't do a
design.
whole new one, I think the era of XK from like 2008,
Yeah,
9.
sort of DB9 looking.
Yeah, it was quite. It was
Yeah.
very Aston looking, which obviously was no accident, but he could really do something that sharpen it up
That would
because
be
they're
cool.
dirt cheap as well now.
Mm.
Well, dirt cheap. They're like
Yeah,
15
yeah.
grand or something, and then you can suddenly pay 50 grand and have something that looks like I don't know, better.
Yeah, that
Less,
would be really
take
cool.
away the wood trim and replace it with like carbon fibre or something. That's annoying. Right. Anyway, that was the news. We had the Chiron, we had Ian Callum, and some other bits and bobs. Let's go over to Rob Burnett in Motorsport Corner. So, what's been happening in motorsport this week?
Well, there's only one place we can start, really. Unfortunately, the very sad news that Anthoine Hubert was killed on Saturday at Spa in the Formula 2 feature race. He was a young French driver. He was in the same kind of cohort as Esteban Ocon, Charles Leclerc, that kind of gang. They were all kind of coming up together. And he won the GP3 championship last year, and he was in F2 this year. He's already won a couple of races. He won at Monaco, he won at Paul Ricard.
So he was well on his way to like Formula One.
He was well on his way. Alain Prost, who is an advisor to the Renault team in Formula One, was speaking about him on the weekend and was saying they were mapping his path basically to Formula One. He was a Renault junior driver, so he was in that family already.
Right, okay.
And it was a very unfortunate accident. In the second lap of the feature race, he went up the hill at Raidillon, hit the barrier, came back out, and then got hit by another car, and very sadly passed away. The race was obviously red flagged and cancelled, and they didn't run the race on Sunday either. So yeah, extremely sad. It was a strange weekend because then his great friend Charles Leclerc went on to win the Grand Prix.
That was his first win, wasn't it?
And that was his first win. So kind of, fitting in a way. He obviously dedicated that win to Anthoine, but he obviously had very mixed emotions, about it. But it was obviously a horrible weekend, but it was, if you can have a nice finish to that, a fitting finish to that kind of thing, then that was it.
I think it just goes to show as well that for all people like me kind of bang on about how boring Formula One is and just like motor racing in general, you can't forget that there's only so much you can do to make it safe. So like you put, obviously as they do, millions and billions of pounds of research into track safety, car safety, everything else, you can't really mitigate against random chaos ensuing. When you're driving cars at 150 to 200 miles an hour, things will bounce around and happen, and you just can't mitigate against that.
I mean, there'll be an investigation. They've already announced there's going to be an investigation, which you would expect. It's only right and proper, and we obviously don't, can't second guess what's going to happen there. But as you say, you can and should always be striving to make it as safe as possible, but you can never make it 100% safe. That's just impossible in a sport where you're, like you say, driving at very high speeds. We should also mention at this point the other driver involved in the crash, Juan Manuel Correa. He was badly injured, broke both his legs. He's stable. He's still in hospital, having had operations. But so obviously we hope he makes full recovery. But yeah, as you say, you can't ever make it 100% safe. The advances that have been made in the last 30, 40 years are incredible. If you think back to Jackie Stewart's day, when there were people being killed all the time.
Survivability was quite low.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have people like Jackie to thank for the fact that this is such a rare occurrence now, and it feels so shocking when it does happen because it so rarely happens, and you sort of forget, that it can.
Yeah.
Well, even the addition of the halo, when that first came on, people were a bit iffy about it. But am I right in saying, was it last year at Spa or the year before, where Alonso went over the top of someone? It might have been Leclerc or someone.
Yes, possibly
and
was Leclerc.
His tyre came right down on top of the
rubber
cockpit.
all over the halo.
There was
wasn't
rubber,
exactly.
yeah.
So even an addition like that has moved safety on massively.
Yes, probably. Then there was another incident, and I think F3 where the halo probably can help to mitigate against an accident being even worse. That was obviously very controversial, and still is in some quarters. But yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton wrote on Saturday night after the incident on Instagram that if you think that this is kind of safe what we're doing, you have to realise it's not. And people aren't used to this kind of thing happening now, and it can't. And complacency can creep in, but
I guess in some ways we're kind of living in an age where it's one of the most politically incorrect things you can still do is go racing, and things like the Isle of Man TT as well, with this kind of fairly patchy record of things going on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there will come a point where this is just deemed unacceptable, and then I guess, we'll move into esports and stuff as a possible replacement. Hopefully, it's not a full replacement, but
Well, and I think the other thing to say about that though is, actually, statistically, it's still one of the safest sports. If you can get very seriously injured and even killed in other contact sports.
Yeah.
And the statistics show that actually motor racing now is one of the safest sports. It seems maybe all the more shocking when it does happen because it happens at 180 miles an hour.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Yeah, no, it's very fine and clear.
I don't want to take away from what happened on the Saturday, but Charles Leclerc's year am I right in saying he's had some very close family deaths, and then for this lad to be one of his mates in F2 also passing away, and then to go on and win, like he's had a hell of a few months.
He's had a terrible time over the last few years. In fact, his father died year before last, just before an F2 race. He went and won that race. Gilles Bianchi was his godfather, although he was only a little bit older than him. So he was very close to him. He obviously had to deal with that. So yeah, and now Anthoine was a close friend of his. He's had a really terrible time, poor old Charles. But he's had, in contrast, if you like, he's having a great year on track. He's taken his first win now. That was a long time coming. He was very close on 3 other occasions. He really looked the class of the field all weekend. 7/10 quicker than Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, in the same car in qualifying on Saturday. And there was a moment which I in a piece I wrote immediately after the race, that because they were on slightly different strategies, there was a moment where Vettel was asked to move over and let Leclerc through.
Barrichello-esque.
Well, almost, and it did just seem, is this quite an instructive moment? Is this for both of them in both of their careers? Because you've got to say at the start of the year, Vettel was the number one, de facto number 1 driver, and Leclerc was the junior learning. It's not looking like that, This was the 6th race in a row Leclerc's outqualified Vettel.
How did they word the move over message? Was it like Shah is faster than you?
Well, they don't have to do it in those coded, ridiculous terms anymore, which is probably for the best. But he did it, and actually Leclerc probably has Vettel to thank for the victory in some part, because as you'll remember, as the laps were ticking down, Hamilton was catching Leclerc, and Leclerc did not have the tyres to defend. If the race had been another 1 or 2 laps even, Hamilton probably would have got him. But crucially, when Hamilton came out after his pit stop, he was behind Vettel, and Vettel held him up, did some brilliant defensive driving to keep Hamilton behind him just for that extra couple of laps. Which really helped Leclerc, and Vettel talked about it after, so like, when I couldn't win, this is what I could do to help my teammate.
Oh, that's nice.
Great.
Actual teamwork rather than
yeah, absolutely. So obviously a terribly sad weekend, a good race in the end, and as fitting a victory as we could hope for, I suppose.
I also just want to quickly, while we're on motorsport, talk about the MotoGP last weekend, British MotoGP at Silverstone.
Great.
Not flooded, unlike last year, which is the only MotoGP Tim has ever been to, and it got flooded.
You had a nice lunch though.
I had a lovely lunch in the Yamaha hospitality, without Valentino Rossi being anywhere near me. But yeah, this year, fantastic race. I won't spoil too much apart from the ending.
I think if people haven't seen it by now,
they should have seen it by now. But basically, the finish there was just so close. I think the past 2 MotoGP races have been like this. Basically, Alex Rins on Suzuki was chasing Marc Marquez on the ever-dominant Honda. And Marquez was basically getting closed down the whole race by Rins. He was just sitting on his tail for like 10, 15 laps, just sussing him out. Penultimate lap, Rins ran wide around the kink at Silverstone Woodcock, because they used the old circuit, not the kind of new fancy one with the wing, and just put his wheel on the outside on the curb as they got near the line. And then Marc Marquez next lap, final lap, crossing the line for the end of the race, kind of basically defended that line, and Rins just nipped up the inside and won by about half a front wheel. And it was just the closest race. I was screaming at my TV. It was amazing. And I think it came out in the after race, kind of post race debrief interview, that actually Alex Rins didn't realise on the penultimate lap, he thought that was the end of the race.
Oh, really?
So he wasn't actually, everyone thought, what a master tactician. He showed his wheel, he's kind of like, laid out his stool for what he's going to do on the last corner. No. He just thought it was the end of the race and went for it. And then he was like, oh, shit, there's another lap. He still won. I've never seen someone so happy to win a MotoGP race.
But that, I have sympathy with him there. I mean, I know he's a professional, possibly he should know. But it must be so confusing to know what that... And you do hear on the radio quite a lot, are you sure this is the last... They're checking with their engineers. Because how... maybe you get a glimpse of a screen when you're going around.
Yeah, well, they have pit boards. And then, they're going past those at 140.
I'm amazed they can read those. I'm always amazed about that.
I presume they've got some display on their dash that shows them something.
Do the bikers have a radio in there?
No radio.
No.
So they communicate through pit boards, and I think they can light up certain parts of the dash for certain things.
Okay.
But I don't know what they're allowed to do for that. It might just be like you're allowed to swap over to your wet bike if the weather changes halfway through and things like that. But yeah, Mike, you've been motorsporting as well, in a sense. You've been to New
Yes,
York.
yeah, in central New York.
That classic motorsport location where it probably will be soon.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
scary.
So we got invited to Gran Turismo World Tour 3, which is the third edition of their esports competition.
Right.
So it's been in Paris, Nürburgring, and then this was the third round in New York, and it was absolutely phenomenal.
You didn't just go to watch people play computer games, you actually took part.
Yeah, so on the Friday was the Pro-Am. So I was against Super GT, who's a big sort of Gran Turismo YouTuber, Matt from WTF1.
Good job that he was named that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That he ended up doing it.
Yeah. Otherwise known as Steve. Good man, Steve Jones. Yeah, WTF1, some sort of gaming writers, some motoring writers from America, and the GT Planet guys.
So they were the AMs, I guess, and you were the AMs.
Yes, and then we got paired up with one of the sort of top GT Sport racers. So I was with a guy called Coque Lopez from Spain, who actually did really well in the actual competition. And we were in a Supra, which was thankfully one of the quickest cars in the sort of space we were in.
Was it a one-make race? Was anyone in the same car in this race? Or?
Not one make. It was the same.
Class.
Yeah, one class.
Yeah.
So it was essentially a GT3 cars. So it was 10 laps, and it was half AM, half Pro, and it was so much fun. There will be a video. Well, by the time this comes out, I imagine the video will be out of the Pro-Am race. It was so much.
How
fun.
long was your stint?
So you could either do 4 laps and 6 with the Pro, or you could do 5 and 5. But I mean, although it was a bit fun, everyone was like, I'm coming in at 4 and my Pro's going to win the race for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, we all dived into the pits, and that was an amazing thing about. I've not played much Gran Turismo Sport, but the actual game is so realistic. The graphics, like the physics, are quite arcadey, but the actual graphics of the game, especially when you go into the pits where the wee guys come out and take your tyres off, it's amazing.
So do you actually have to drive all the way into the pit box, or does it take control when you cross the entry line?
So you basically drive flat out to the entry line,
and
then
it slams the speed off.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was great fun. I qualified in 10th, which was actually above Juan Pablo Montoya of all people.
How many people were racing?
There was 12 in total, so didn't do that great in qualifying, but managed to get up to 4th midway through the race.
That's
and
impressive.
Then Koke had a bit of a tough time. Basically, Koke got punted once it was his punted at a hairpin. So we ended up finishing 6th. So having started in 10th, I was quite happy with that.
That's not bad.
So Gran Turismo, you would recommend it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's good viewing as well.
Yeah,
that was going to be my question. Like, as a spectator sport.
Well, I actually think if you can, go back on the Gran Turismo YouTube channel and check out the live streams from Saturday and Sunday. So there's a manufacturer series where the guys represent, manufacturers actually scout these guys and get them to represent. And then the Nations Cup is on the Sunday, which is guys representing their own individual countries. And genuinely cracking racing, and the way they direct it, picking what car to show up on screen, is so engaging to watch. And you get into it just like you do in any other motorsport. It had the same vibe to Formula E in that action just comes out of nowhere. There might be a slight lull, and then suddenly it just all kicks off.
That's really cool.
So genuinely, I think you should tune into it, or wait for the next round in Salzburg, which is in a couple of weeks.
In Austria.
Yes.
And you're going back over there, I think.
So we'll be creating content again from that. But yeah, I absolutely love it. Esports, if this is the start, God knows where it'll be in like 5 years'
it's going
time.
to be cool. So I think a couple of us in the office have just invested in these Oculus Quest VR headsets. Rob's got one, I've got one, Lucy is behind the camera, she's just got one. And I was the biggest cynic, but now just sitting in bed watching 360 videos on YouTube and playing VR games, it is, again, it's like next level. And I think we're at a point with technology where lots of things have kind of been gestating for a while, like VR, 360, esports, but we're finally at a stage where it's just all kicking off. So yeah, get involved if you can check out the Gran Turismo stuff, and also check out Oculus Quest, very good VR headset, not sponsored, but we basically should be. Cool, so that kind of does bring us to the end of this episode of the DriveTribe podcast. We'll try and do one a week, we promise. Thank you for watching and listening. I would just want to leave you with a thought which I'll pick up next time, which is, you're not as good a driver as you think you are. I've been Tim.
I've been Mike.
And I've been Rob.
And see you next time. We have no outro jingle, so goodbye in silence.